My husband can't impregnate me, so I decided to have a one-night stand without him knowing. But then, in this world, you only look out for yourself. Just kidding, LOL. Hi, Redditors, welcome to my pep talk. I had a one-night stand with a guy without my husband knowing, and he found out and sent me packing. I know you all would be like, why did you cheat on your husband? Didn't you love him? What's wrong with women? You see, this is where you all would be wrong. The problem wasn't whether I loved my husband. It was probably because I had loved him too much that I had ended up losing him in the end. Yes, I had loved my husband to bits and pieces, and when he had found out what I did, he had sent me packing and it had broken my heart. Well, I could say me sleeping with another man had broken his heart too, but I don't know why he didn't see the end point like I did. The main reason why I'd had a one-night stand with another guy in the first place had been because of him. And what does he do when he finds out? He sent me packing with nothing to my name and left me scarred at the revenge he pulled on me. It still haunts me to this day. Well, I guess you would have sent me packing if it was your brother I had slept with. Yes, I had slept with my husband's sworn enemy of a brother. In my defense, I hadn't known it was his brother. My husband has left out the part of mentioning he had a brother while we had been dating, and since I had been married to him for the past 4 years, I had never heard or seen my husband's mysterious brother. Then fate decided to play a cruel trick on me, and the one man I had gone to have a one-night stand with so I could bring home a baby for my husband so he wouldn't leave me, happened to be my husband's brother. The twisted irony. So once again, Redditors, welcome to my talk and stay with me as I narrate how I had lost the love of my life because I had had a one-night stand. My name is Jayla and I'm 26 years old. My husband's name is Pete, or should I say was because he isn't my husband anymore. Anyway, he's 30 years old. Pete and I have been neighbors ever since I had moved to Fort Smith, Arkansas after my parents had died and I didn't have anyone else. I had just wanted to get away from it all, so I had moved to a little city that most people wouldn't know. Well, it's not so little anyway. I had wanted to start from scratch and I had gotten my wish. Pete was my neighbor and I always used to see him go on morning jogs, so one day I just got up the courage to join him. I needed something that would keep me from slipping into my depression, and Pete was handsome and looked like he could keep good conversation, so I had spontaneously joined him one morning. Boom, that was the start of our amazing friendship. Recall when I said I had loved Pete to bits? I probably still do. Well, our early morning runs had been the foundation of it. I don't want to sound like Colleen Hoover or anything, for the book lovers who get it, but Pete had kept me sane and I kind of couldn't do without him. I was 21 at this time, fresh out of college with nothing but my dead parents' inheritance, which had almost finished, by the way, because I had used 3/4 of it to purchase a house. I didn't want to think about what I would do next with my life and just move day by day. Pete was caring and kind and knew I was battling with issues and just let me be. He was free and I could talk to him about almost anything during our runs. He had been the one to help me secure my first job as a waitress and always listened to me when I had talked about my dream of opening a restaurant. Pete and I were friends for about 3 months. I didn't know anything about him, and he knew almost next to everything about me. This was how I hadn't known that he had a brother. The only person Pete ever talked about willingly in his family had been his mom. So don't blame me for not knowing the guy had a brother. He was a closed book. I had even been the one to ask him out because I had well and truly fallen. If I hadn't been there to give that push, I would probably still be running tracks along the park in the early hours of the morning. At least that would have been better than being divorced and losing him. Anyway, Pete and I began dating after 3 months of doing tracks with him. It had been me who initiated it. Just like I had initiated going over to his house, making him dinner, all the things you did when you like somebody. I liked the guy, so I was going to do everything possible to make him like me back. Acts of service was my love language. Now I don't have anything like love in my life. And it had all been as a result of all the stupid decisions I had made that had led me up to this stupid point in my life where I had nothing. Pete and I got married after a year of dating. No, I hadn't been the one to propose, LOL. But if it had been left to me, I would have done it in a heartbeat, but luckily, Pete had the sense to ask me to be his wife. I had snatched up that ring before his knees even hit the ground. Our proposal had been just a small gathering of our friends. Majorly his friends, because this was the city he had grown up in. Our wedding had been even smaller, but I had loved it because I had loved the man I had been getting married to. The only people from his family that had graced our wedding had been his mom and his long-distant cousin. He had introduced us, and I had fallen in love with his mom too. Pete and I had a wonderful first year of marriage. Every day had been like our honeymoon, and I didn't want it to end. Maybe if I hadn't wished so hard for it not to end, then maybe it wouldn't have ended. I wished too hard. Pete was good to me. We traveled when we could. My schedule hadn't been tight, but his had been because he had held an important position in his workplace. I think he had been the chief financial officer of the company. So it wasn't every week he had to leave, but we had made it work. When we couldn't travel, my man had taken me on dates, the fun fair, haunted house, the movies, outdoor parks, classy restaurants. Every romantic place you could think of to take a woman on a date. I had been there thanks to my husband. It had been obvious that he had loved me just like I loved him. But our love hadn't been enough. Things started going south after our second year of being married. By the second half of our third year in marriage, we decided we wanted to start trying for children. I love children, and had always dreamed of having one whenever I could, so I was ecstatic to start trying for a baby. We tried the first month and nothing, and tried the second month and still nothing. My husband had been like we should give it a rest and we would continue when the time was right. I had gone with the plan and tried not to think about it and hoped in due time I would just pop up pregnant. Yeah, that delusion didn't happen. I couldn't stop thinking about it because I had been scared that my womb was all messed up, and I couldn't conceive and my husband was going to leave me. This fear had me on a chokehold until we found out the main cause of my infertility. I had done something when I was much younger and naive. It wasn't my first rodeo with sex when I had gotten married. I hadn't been a virgin when I had married my husband. Plus, I feel free to say this here because none of you are ever going to meet me, so I feel it's a safe space. I'd had an abortion when I was younger, so this had been my major fear when I had started trying for children, and the children hadn't been forthcoming. No, I wasn't superstitious or anything. I had just used the wrong method to get rid of the baby. Here's what had happened. My boyfriend back then, when I had been in college, my first year of college to be exact, had caused me to abort the baby. We had slept together, and when I had told him I was pregnant for him, his response had been to go and sleep with another girl in my presence. His point had been to show me that he could easily get another girl, so I didn't need to lie about a baby to tie him down. The psycho thought I had been lying about another life to keep his useless ass. So I had angrily gone to get rid of the baby. I hadn't gone to the hospital because I knew that would raise questions, and I didn't want those questions and them linking me back to my parents. I hadn't wanted them to find out, so I had gone to a lady that was said to run these things around campus. Yes, there had been a lady that handled this type of thing. So yeah, I had gone to her and I had cried at the pain, and the amount of blood I had seen leaving my body that night had passed me out. It was because of this reason that I had feared that I had been the cause of why I wasn't getting a baby like I had hoped, and that my husband would find out and leave me. Luckily, we had still been trying and hadn't decided to take things to the hospital yet. My husband hadn't been in a hurry then and wasn't frustrated about it. However, over time, I became frustrated about it and started becoming obsessed with cycles and ovulation days and patterns, teas, massage pads, supplements, anything that would make my reproductive system feel like doing the work it was meant to do. At this point, I think I had even scared my husband due to how obsessed I was to see it work. I had just wanted to have a baby for the man. What had been my offense? Anyway, my husband had seen how stressed and frustrated I was getting over the process, so he had decided to surprise me. You all remember when I had mentioned I worked as a waitress and hoped to own my restaurant someday. So my husband took me out on a date and took me to a fancy restaurant and gave me a check of $10,000 and told me I should start looking for rentals or floor plans of my own place because I would be getting my restaurant soon. Now, why would I want to leave such a man willingly? Why did I have to make the stupid choices that I had made? When he had given me the check, I had actually wept a little because he values my dreams, and it showed he listened to everything I said even when I had thought he didn't. I had been so happy, and we had gone home to try out the best positions to have a baby. 4 months had gone by and there was nothing to show for it. Nothing. Zit. Nada. No proof that my husband and I had been making moves in the other room. Nothing at all. I had been livid and frustrated. In fact, I had gone through the 5 stages of grief. I had even contemplated telling my husband the truth about that one abortion I'd had in college, but that would risk me losing my dream restaurant, so I kept shut, and we continued trying it in the bedroom, until my cousin came and threatened to expose me for who I was. She even told my husband after I had done everything she had asked me to do. Yes, another twist. I hadn't even known she had known about my abortion, but she knew, and she decided to blackmail me because of that piece of information. My cousin, who I had never related to when we had been kids. She was the only child, too, and her parents were still very much alive, so she always felt she was better off than me. Even before my parents died, she had always had this aura of supremacy and superiority around her. Like what she said goes. I hadn't even known she was coming to visit me for Thanksgiving. She had just called me one evening that she was in Fort Smith and wanted to know my house address. That was how demanding she was. Anyway, I had sent her my address, and within the next 30 minutes, she had been at my doorstep, like she was lurking in the corners like a vampire just waiting for an invitation to come in from me. She had come for Thanksgiving, although Thanksgiving wasn't until another month. That was how my cousin started leaving with me. I hadn't hated my cousin before. I just had an emotion of indifference towards her. Then she made me hate her. I had known her coming to my place was suspicious. Can you imagine? This bitch wanted to take my husband from right underneath my nose. She hadn't even come for my wedding, so I was wondering how I had let her into my house. How had I known she wanted to screw my husband? The signs had been obvious. She would touch him when she thought I wasn't looking, but I was, and she would laugh loudly at his jokes like a girl who was flirting and not the old 30-plus woman she was. It had all been so irritating, so I had to warn her not to dare do that. It seemed like my warning had awoken the tiger because she went full danger mode on me. She didn't even care about me seeing her flirt with my husband M. My cousin decided to do it openly, and my husband was quite uncomfortable with the attention he was getting from her, so he had to start staying out of the house. This happened for like 2 weeks, and my husband had to sleep in his office like 3 times during the week, and only came home to change before taking off to work again. I warned her again that she was in my home and that she should comport herself, or I was going to have to ask her to leave. This was what happened when children were raised with the mentality that they could get whatever they wanted. My cousin behaved for about a week, and my husband finally came home. That night we had a discussion concerning how best we were going to tackle not having a child, and I think my cousin had overheard us because the next day she slid up to where I was cooking in the kitchen and told me something that almost made me drop the knife I had been holding to my feet. She had said, "Bet your husband didn't know you don't have a functional womb anymore." You guys, I think I had my mouth open for about 3 minutes staring at her in shock and wondering how she had found out my secret. When I had asked her what she was talking about, she had told me not to play coy with her and had told me how she knew. Apparently, one night I had stayed over at her house after my parents died. I had drunk alcohol and told her how I had ruined my body by having a bad abortion and how I had hidden it from my parents and how they wouldn't be proud of me for what I had done. I had cursed when my cousin was done, and she was smiling like the villain bitch she was. This was how she had gotten leverage over me. So I couldn't tell her how to behave in my house or what to say around my husband because she knew my secret, and she used it to taint me every day of her stay. And she had stayed past Thanksgiving, and she still continued to torment me. I told you guys she loved having the upper hand over someone. She tried so many things to get my husband, knowing that I wasn't going to say anything about it to her. She flirted openly, touched him inappropriately. She had even grabbed my husband's butt one time. This had been the point when my husband had decided he was going to be staying at his office full-time until I sorted out the situation with my cousin. She had overstayed her welcome, and yet she didn't want to go because she had found something she could use to toy with me. I couldn't tell her to leave because up next she was going to move to my husband with my secret. When she saw she couldn't get to my husband anymore, the next thing my cousin tried was blackmail. The bitch blackmailed me. My husband wasn't coming home anymore, so the next best thing after my husband was the money. A gold digger, true and true. She couldn't get the gold out of my husband, so she was going to get it through me, and I was gullible as a fish out of water, not knowing that it was all going to be for nothing. Yes, nothing prepared me for the outcome of her blackmailing. She had come up to me one afternoon after I had just got back from my morning shift and demanded I take her shopping at a local brand outlet. In her own words, she had just wanted to pick up a few things. I had told her I would drive her, and off we had gone to the store. Fun fact, my cousin picked out the whole store, after she had emphasized on only getting a few things, and demanded that I pay for them at the counter. Could you imagine that? When I had looked at her like she was obviously crazy, she decided to play the blackmail card. This was how it began. Another cycle of dealing with her hanging my secret over my head. I paid for the items out of my nose, by the way, and we had gone home. The next day, she wanted to go sightseeing. I had taken her and paid for everything she had got on her trip. Every time I had opened my mouth to tell her I wasn't going to pay, she waved the blackmail card like a magic wand, and I shut up and swiped my card in the payment slot. Over time, I got tired of her excesses. It was already Christmas, and she had shown no sign of leaving yet, and I was so tired of her and all her BS. I told her it was time for her to leave my house. She had walked up to my husband as he had come home and started talking about abortions and asking my husband how he would feel about a woman who had gotten one. Of course, my husband had been against it, but my cousin had proved her point. I had dragged her to my room, and I had told her plump and plain that she should call any amount that would make her leave and never come back to my house. I would pay it. even though I literally had next to nothing in my account because she had scraped everything out from one shopping trip to another. I was totally fed up with her. I needed her gone so I could finally breathe in 2 months. I was tired. A girl could only take so much. My cousin had asked for $10,000 to disappear and never remembered that I exist in any part of the world. I had stared in shock at her request. When I had asked her to state her price of silence, I hadn't expected it to be this high. Then I remembered the money my husband had given me to put aside for my dream restaurant. I hadn't wanted to do it, but I wanted peace of mind. I gave her the money, and the next day my cousin was out of my door. I should have known that was too good to be true. I should never have taken her word for it, and I have the right to blame every person on this earth for the hand fate dealt me. Well, everyone except for myself. It hadn't even been up to 2 weeks since my cousin had left our lives, and we finally had peace to continue trying out options to get a baby, when my husband got a text as we had been watching a movie together. I hadn't paid it any mind because I thought it was work, but my husband threw me off my body and asked me if it was true that I had gotten an abortion before. That was how my cousin had thrown me under the bus. I had no other choice but to come clean, thinking my husband would throw me out of his house. Then I would have lost the money and then lost my husband. Fortunately, my husband did no such thing, and he had been even calm and collected about it. His only problem was that I had not told him about it, and this was what might have been delaying us from conceiving. With that off my chest, I could finally breathe fine. I should have gulped in enough breaths for the downfall about to happen. But I doubt I could have taken in enough breath to prepare me for the path my life was about to take from that point on. Back then, I had just been angry that I had been scammed of $10,000 by my immediate cousin, and there was no way I could tell my husband that. In my head, that might have been the thing to break my marriage. I didn't know an unexpected twist was coming. My husband and I went to the hospital for our checkup after I had revealed to him that I'd had a dangerous abortion during my first year at college. We had gone thinking I was the problem, but we didn't know that we would leave with a surprise. I had told the doctor of my situation and how it was possible it was what was hindering me from having a baby, and the doctor had ordered us to do some tests. Pete and I had gone through a series of tests that day. I can still recall the needles that had pulled and prodded in my skin. After the test, we had gone back the next day, and the doctor revealed that I wasn't the problem. There was absolutely nothing wrong with my reproductive system, and I was fit to carry healthy babies. I had never been more ecstatic until he revealed the problem why we hadn't been able to conceive. Apparently, it was my husband. Yes, my husband had a low sperm count that meant his sperm cells hadn't been strong enough to swim up to my egg. This was why we couldn't have any babies. My husband had been the cause of it. This had been where the issues in my marriage started properly. This was already my 4th year of marriage to my husband and the love of my life. After the news from the doctor, Pete became distant. It was like what had happened to me, when I had thought the problem was me, was happening to him. I didn't know what to do. I tried to cheer him up and told him that there were going to be several methods of getting pregnant, but my husband just completely shut me off. It was as if the fact that he couldn't impregnate me was a demon that had paralyzed his soul, and he couldn't bear to look at me. I had left my husband to sulk while I had Googled other options. Apparently, there had been other methods we could try out, like in vitro fertilization and other assisted ways of getting pregnant. However, when I had brought this up to my husband, it looked like I had damaged his pride more, and he had closed the door on me. So my husband hadn't wanted assisted means of reproducing, and had probably always prided himself in his C*M game, so that was why it had hurt his pride so much. LOL. I didn't think that was it, though. I felt it was more or less that he didn't have the money for the full IVF procedure, as he wanted to start up his own company, and he had already dumped all his money into the building of his future startup. This was when I had started making stupid decisions. If my husband wasn't going to come up with solutions for me to have a baby, then I was going to take the problem and solve it myself. Then I had made the mistake of mentioning the use of a sperm donor to him. My husband and I had quarreled that night, and he had banged and locked me out of our bedroom. So I had decided to take my frustrations out of the house to a local bar. I drank until I couldn't see my own 2 feet. Then I checked inside my handbag, and I saw a surprise that my husband had been hiding from me. LOL, only him would think to hide something surprising in the most obvious of places. I never checked my bags, and maybe he thought hiding it in here I wouldn't see it until the time is right. And I wouldn't have seen it if I wasn't drunk and looking for money to call a cab. You all wouldn't believe what my husband had gotten me. A rental property to start my cafeteria business. My husband had been the real deal. Sobs. I don't know how I had let a good man like that sloop right out my fingertips and right out of my life. Well, I know how I did it. I had a one-night stand with his brother Lowell. After the drink, I had stood to get up, but the ground had felt all wobbly. And before I had crashed to the floor, a hand came and caught my fall. He was the second most handsome man I had seen in my life. Second to my husband, of course. Then he took me out of the bar, and the rest was history. My decisions came back to haunt me in the ass in a little over 2 weeks. I had left the house documents in the hands of the stranger and had gone home like my tail was on fire after I had slept with him and cheated on my husband. I hadn't even remembered the documents until my husband had begun looking for them. Obviously, I wasn't supposed to know about the documents, so when he was telling me what it was that was missing, he had said rental properties documents. That was how I had known it had been that document I had found in my bag. My brain went on full-time mode and I tried to remember who I had given the papers to, but the face was kind of blurry. I didn't need to wait long anyway. The devil that I'd had a one-night stand with suddenly showed up to my house and revealed himself as my husband's brother. My jaws had opened as wide as it could when I had seen him standing outside the front door. I had first thought it was a prank or he was trying to do something stupid like spare me or blackmail. But then he had asked if his brother, my husband, was home. My jaw had dropped 10 times more. I had slept with my husband's brothers, and the son of a bastard knew, from the corny way he had smiled when he had been asked to come into my husband's office. What had he been looking at? I never got to find out because the next thing that I knew, my husband was steaming and towering over me. He had found out what had happened. I had been drunk, so I had gone home with him and tried to sell my husband's property to him so we could have sex, and I could bring home a baby so my husband wouldn't leave me. I had remembered it all. I had remembered every single thing that happened that night, even though I usually don't remember things that I do when I drink. Anyway, my husband knew I had remembered, and I had signed the house over to his brother and still allowed him to sleep with me. Pete was furious. He didn't even allow me to explain. He had shouted that it wasn't even that long that we found out that we couldn't have a baby the normal way, and the thing I could do was run to his brother and then tell his brother how he couldn't have a child. I couldn't believe I had done all that, really. Although I understood my husband's pain and everything, I had a right to be angry, didn't I? He had a brother and he hadn't told me? What was I supposed to do with that information? I couldn't even bring myself to process everything that was going on at that moment. But what I could bring myself to process was when I saw my husband dragging down my suitcase and throwing them outside. What had just seemed funny in this situation was how my husband's brother had just stood and watched from the sidelines, in the same house he had just wrecked, and was smiling that weird smile. How had I slept with the guy? I couldn't believe love for my husband had blinded me so much that I had spread my leg for that man. I begged and pleaded with my husband that I had done it for him and not any other thing else. I had told him I hadn't even known he had a brother. But just like that, my husband's heart was closed off against me because he didn't even give me the chance to explain, and he shut the door in my face, after he had thrown his brother out, of course. I didn't have anywhere else to stay because I didn't have any friends, so I had begged a former co-worker to let me stay at her place. Oh, I think I forgot to mention that my husband me quit my job after my cousin had left. He had thought maybe it was the stress from work that had been disturbing my female hormones, so I should quit. I had no money except the ones he had chosen to give me to take care of myself and the house. I didn't know that I had fallen so far into my own dug pit. Then I had made the mistake of trying to dig myself out of that pit, and I trusted the wrong person. I was naive and foolish, and maybe I deserved what I got because of this foolish decision I had made to still involve my husband's brother in my marriage. But I was out of my house and squatting with someone whom I didn't know, and whom I was probably sure hated me. I don't know why I thought fixing the root of the problem, my husband's relationship with his brother, was going to somehow fix my marriage. This was when I had still been thinking the problem was fixable. Yeah, my delusions once again, folks. I had gone to my husband's brother to ask him what had happened between them that made my husband hate him so much. Apparently, my husband's brother had stolen my husband's girl right from under his nose. My husband didn't take well to betrayal according to his brother and cut off communications with people over the littlest of things. I had thought my husband's brother was exaggerating until I had received a soft copy of a divorce letter and message that read that the real papers were at my friend's place and that I should sign them and have them mailed to him. I had thought his brother had been exaggerating until it had happened to me. I had grown livid. Another mistake. I mean, I had only been trying to help so we could get the children we desperately wanted, and this was how he wanted to discard me without allowing me the opportunity to explain my side of the story. No. I made up my mind that we were going to see in court. I had asked my husband's brother for monetary help. Another terrible mistake. Anyway, I took my husband to court to demand the right for the property. He had bought it in my name, so he couldn't take that away. If that was the only thing that I walked away from in the marriage, then so be it. I won the case of the property. I had been so excited that I had lost sight of what had made me go to the courts in the first place. I was already late by then. Then the court bill came and my husband's brother disappeared into thin air. I had to sell back the property I had gone to court to fight. And of course, you know who I had sold it to. Yes, my ex-husband. I had been so humiliated when I had done that. He had asked me to come to his place to give him the document, and when I had gotten there, he was having a mini party with my picture at the entrance of the door and a write-up that said, "Good riddance to the cheat." I entered inside and all eyes turned on me. I found my ex-husband by the fireplace of our house addressing the party, and when he saw me, he told everyone that I had slept with his brother. I had dropped the papers and ran out of there with tears. I entered my car and then drove away. I hadn't known one of my tires had been lessened, and I swerved and crashed into something and tumbled in the car. The next thing, I found myself at the hospital. This was where I found out that I was pregnant. Just one try. One shot, and I had actually gotten pregnant from my ex-husband's brother. Life was real twisted. I paid off the court bills and the hospital bills, and when I'd gone back there to get work, I was denied an interview. It was at this moment I knew my husband had influence in the city. Every job I applied for was denied, and I still didn't have a place to stay, and little money that was finishing fast. So I had to leave Fort Smith back to Minnesota. I regret making the decisions I made that caused my husband to leave me and my life to become miserable.